He was a billionaire who could control markets with a phone call, yet powerless to ease the suffering of the woman he loved. When he brought her into his empire one morning, a simple act of kindness from his secretary changed everything. Hello family, welcome to Folktales by Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Crosstech Tower, turning it into a mirror that seemed to stretch into the clouds. Ethan Cross stood in his penthouse suite, tugging at the cuffs of his charcoal suit, his movements precise, practiced. To the world, he was every inch the billionaire CEO, sharp, untouchable, a man with no time for distractions. But today was different. Behind him, on the velvet sofa, Lily shifted beneath a knitted shawl. Her frame looked too small against the cushions, her skin pale under the soft morning light. She tried to sit up straighter, offering him a smile that carried more bravery than strength. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, her voice steady despite the fatigue beneath it. "I'll be fine until you're back." Ethan's hand stilled on his cufflink. He turned to her, his gaze tender in a way no boardroom had ever seen. "I can't leave you alone today, Lily. Not with how you were last night." She exhaled a small sigh, half protest, half surrender. "And what will your people think when their mighty boss shows up with baggage?" The word cut him, but he stepped forward, kneeling in front of her so they were eye to eye. "You're not baggage. You're my heart. And if anyone at that office has a problem with you being there, they can answer to me." For a moment, her facade cracked, and he caught the glimmer of tears she fought back. Ethan brushed his thumb across her hand, anchoring her with his touch. Minutes later, his private driver opened the car door, and Ethan helped Lily inside. As the vehicle pulled away, Ethan's eyes lingered on her reflection in the tinted window. The city outside was alive with movement, people rushing, deals being made, dreams being chased, but all he could think about was the woman beside him and the quiet war she was fighting inside her own body. By the time they arrived at the towering headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted. Employees hurried through the revolving doors, their conversations brisk, their footsteps sharp. When Ethan stepped out with Lily leaning gently against his arm, a ripple of surprise passed through the lobby. No one dared say a word, but the curious glances were impossible to ignore. Ethan didn't flinch. His stride remained steady, his presence commanding as ever. But his hand, the one guiding Lily, never once let go. And for the first time in the company's history, the untouchable Ethan Cross let his employees see him not just as their leader, but as a man with something fragile, someone worth protecting, walking at his side. The elevator ride to the executive floor was cloaked in silence, save for the low hum of gears rising through glass and steel. Ethan stood tall, as he always did, the picture of composure, but his right hand never left Lily's. He rubbed small circles against her knuckles, an unspoken promise that he wouldn't let her fall. Lily leaned against him, her shawl drawn close, her dark curls brushed neatly back though her skin looked too pale under the morning light. The reflection staring back at her from the mirrored wall made her chuckle softly. "Don't I look terribly out of place next to you?" she whispered. Ethan turned to her, his eyes warm. "You look like the only person who belongs." The elevator chimed, and the doors slid open. The executive floor was a temple of precision, glass walls, clean lines, polished floors that echoed every heel click. Assistants carrying tablets slowed their pace, conversations faltered, and a ripple of quiet swept through the corridor. The sight of Ethan Cross arriving wasn't unusual. But Ethan Cross arriving with a woman leaning gently on his arm? That was unheard of. Ethan's stride didn't waver. He walked with the same confidence that had carried him into boardrooms across the globe, but his touch on Lily's back was featherlight guiding. No one dared whisper aloud, but glances traded like sparks. Some carried surprise, others curiosity, but all carried a question no one would voice. Who is she? Inside his corner office, sunlight spilled across black marble and honey-colored wood, every surface polished to gleam. The room had always been a stage for power, contracts signed, empires expanded, futures decided. Yet now, when Lily eased into the armchair by the window, the space shifted. The sharp edges seemed less important, the grandeur almost excessive, compared to the fragile calm she brought with her. Lily tucked her shawl tighter and gave a small laugh, the sound both tired and teasing. This office feels like a museum. Everything shines so much, I'm afraid to touch anything. Ethan loosened his tie, crouching in front of her. His fingers brushed the blanket over her knees, fussing with its corners though it was already perfectly placed. You're the only thing I want here today. Forget the office. Forget the shine. If you need quiet, I'll clear the whole floor. She tilted her head, amusement softening her features. And what will your employees say, being sent home because your partner wanted a nap? They'll survive, he murmured, his lips quirking in a smile meant only for her. Her eyes lingered on him, and for a moment the office was no longer intimidating. It was simply a space where she could breathe while the man she loved, who carried entire companies on his shoulders, chose to kneel at her feet. A knock interrupted the fragile moment. "Come in," Ethan called, his voice snapping back to its usual command. The door opened and Clara Hayes stepped in, folders balanced neatly in her hands. She was as polished as the office itself, navy suit, neat bun, a quiet confidence that had carried her through 6 years at Ethan's side. She had seen him furious at delays, relentless in negotiations, exhausted after 18-hour flights. But she had never seen him like this. Her gaze flicked briefly to Lily, and in that glance, Clara noticed everything. The shawl draped across thin shoulders. The way Lily's hands rested delicately in her lap. The subtle shift in Ethan's body language. His protective lean toward the chair, his watchful eyes. Clara's instincts, sharp as always, told her this was no casual visitor. This was someone important. She smiled, genuine and warm. "Good morning, Mr. Cross." Then, turning with equal respect, she said, "And good morning to you. I don't believe we've met." Ethan straightened, his hand lingering lightly on the back of Lily's chair. "This is Lily. She'll be here with us today." Clara inclined her head. "It's a pleasure, Lily. If you need anything, tea, water, a softer chair, just say the word." Lily's eyes brightened at the kindness. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." Something passed unspoken between the three of them in that moment. Clara didn't press with questions, didn't pry into what her boss had clearly kept private. She simply acknowledged Lily's presence with grace, treating her not as a disruption, but as someone who mattered. As Clara set the folders on Ethan's desk and made her way out, she glanced back once more. The image struck her more deeply than she expected. The formidable Ethan Cross, standing not as a CEO commanding his empire, but as a man gently watching over the woman he loved. Clara stepped into the hall, the click of her heels muted by the thoughts stirring in her chest. Today, she realized, would not be ordinary, and she had no idea just how much it would change them all. The morning crept along in its usual rhythm of ringing phones and urgent emails, though Ethan barely noticed. His focus split between his laptop screen and the armchair near the window, where Lily sat wrapped in her shawl. She tried to look content, but every so often her eyes closed as if the weight of simply being awake pressed too heavily on her. When Ethan excused himself for a boardroom call, Clara slipped into the office with a stack of folders. She paused at the sight of Lily alone, the faint lines of weariness on her face. Setting the files aside, Clara spoke gently. "Would you like something warm to drink? Tea, maybe?" Lily blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly. "Yes, please. That would be nice." A few minutes later, Clara returned with chamomile in a porcelain cup, steam curling up in thin threads. Along with it, she brought a soft throw blanket from the lounge. "I thought you might be more comfortable with this," Clara said. Lily's smile deepened, her voice soft with gratitude. "You didn't have to go out of your way." Clara eased into the chair across from her, just for a moment. Sometimes it's the little things that make the day easier. That simple kindness opened the door. They spoke quietly about books Lily loved and about music. Clara mentioned her fondness for jazz, which made Lily's eyes brighten. "Oh, Ethan used to put Coltrane on in the evenings," she said with a small laugh. He'd try to hum along, completely out of tune. The laugh that followed was light and unforced, spilling into the quiet room. Clara found herself chuckling too, picturing her boss, the formidable Ethan Cross, fumbling with melody. Neither noticed him standing in the doorway until Lily glanced up. Ethan leaned against the frame, tablet forgotten in his hand, his eyes fixed on her. He hadn't heard that laugh in weeks. Lily reached for him as he came closer. Your secretary has been spoiling me. Clara straightened. Just keeping her company, sir. But when Ethan knelt by Lily's chair and took her hand, he understood it was more than that. Clara hadn't just offered tea and a blanket. She had reminded Lily of herself, not her sickness. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt both grateful and humbled. Ethan sat at his desk after Clara left, his hands resting on a closed folder he hadn't even read. His mind was elsewhere, circling around the sound of Lily's laughter still hanging faintly in the room. It had been so natural, so alive. He looked at her now, curled in the armchair, sipping the last of the chamomile Clara had brought. She seemed lighter, her shoulders relaxed in a way he hadn't seen for weeks. And it wasn't because of him. That realization struck deeper than he expected. Rising, Ethan crossed to her side and crouched beside the chair. "You look happy," he said quietly. Lily tilted her head, smiling at him with a softness that warmed the edges of his heart. "That's because she treated me like Lily. Not the patient. Not the fragile one. Just me." The words sank into him. How many days had he spent hovering over her, measuring her meals, her medicine, her energy, without realizing that in his carefulness, he'd been shrinking the world around her. He had been her shield, yes, but not her companion. Ethan clasped her hand, his thumb brushing her skin. "I've been so focused on protecting you that maybe I forgot how to just be with you." She squeezed his fingers gently. "You've been carrying so much. I never doubted your love, Ethan. But sometimes I just need you, not the guard you've built around me." He breathed deeply, pressing his forehead briefly to her hand. "I don't want to lose sight of that again." When he rose, his gaze drifted to the door Clara had exited moments before. He had never paid much thought to the little things she did, managing his world so it ran without pause. But today, she had done something far greater. She had reminded him what love looked like outside of responsibility. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt the heavy armor around his heart shift, making space for something tender. The afternoon light softened the sharp edges of the office, painting everything in shades of amber. Ethan sat behind his desk, silent, staring at the skyline as though the answers to his unrest lay hidden among the rooftops. The folders stacked neatly in front of him remained untouched. When Clara entered with the next day's agenda, he didn't greet her with his usual crisp acknowledgement. Instead, he said quietly, "Close the door." Something in his tone gave her pause. She obeyed, setting the papers aside. He leaned back in his chair, shoulders tense, hands pressed together under his chin. The man who always looked unshakable suddenly seemed uncertain. "Tell me, Clara," he said after a long silence. "Have you ever felt like you were winning everywhere except where it mattered most?" Her brow furrowed. "That depends on what you mean." Ethan exhaled, the sound heavy. "I built this company from the ground up. I make decisions every day that affect thousands of lives. And people call me capable, dependable, untouchable." His jaw tightened. "But with Lily, none of that matters. I can negotiate billion-dollar contracts, but I can't ease her pain. I watch her fade, and all I do is hover, measure, manage. It feels like I'm failing her." Clara softened, stepping closer. She had seen him furious, seen him cold, seen him brilliant, but never like this. His voice carried a weight that belonged not to a CEO, but to a man afraid of breaking. "You're not failing," she said firmly. "You're there. That's what matters. Love isn't proven by fixing everything. It's proven by staying, even when you can't fix a thing." Ethan's eyes lifted to hers, searching. For a moment, the room felt stripped bare, no walls of power or formality between them. "I've been so obsessed with control," he admitted, his tone softer now. "With protecting her, scheduling her, making sure she doesn't stumble. But maybe all I've done is remind her of how fragile she is. I don't think I've just been her partner lately. I've been her warden." The confession hung in the air, raw and unpolished. Clara's heart tugged at the honesty she heard beneath it. "Then let her see you again," Clara replied gently. "Not the protector, not the CEO, just Ethan. She doesn't need you to fight her battles. She needs you to sit beside her while she fights." Ethan leaned back, her words sinking deeper than any counsel he'd ever received. He had paid fortunes for expert advice in business, but it was this simple, human, unguarded, that broke something loose inside him. After a long silence, he gave a slow nod. Not the nod of a boss approving a task, but the nod of a man beginning to understand how to love differently. The office was unusually quiet the next morning. Ethan had insisted on working from home to give Lily more rest, but Clara still came in early, as she always did, making sure the machinery of Crosstech didn't falter. She moved through her tasks with practiced efficiency, yet her thoughts lingered on the moment in Ethan's office the day before. The crack in his armor, the confession he hadn't spoken to anyone else. By mid-morning, she was summoned upstairs. Ethan was back after all, Lily resting in his office again. Clara carried a tray with tea and light snacks, her heels soft against the marble floor. When she stepped inside, Lily greeted her with a smile. "I was hoping I'd see you again," she said warmly. Clara's lips curved in return. "And I brought reinforcements." She set the tray on the table, pouring the tea with careful hands. As they settled, Lily studied her curiously. "You're different from what I expected. I thought a man like Ethan would have a secretary who was all business, no warmth. But you care." Clara hesitated, her gaze dropping for a moment before she answered. "Maybe because I know what it's like to sit where you are. To feel fragile when the world keeps moving at its usual pace." Lily tilted her head. "You've been through this before?" The pause stretched, but Clara didn't look away. "I lost someone I loved to illness a few years ago. It taught me that sometimes the smallest gestures, tea, a blanket, a simple conversation, mean more than anything else. I guess that's why I noticed what you needed." Ethan, who had been silent at his desk, looked up sharply. For all the years he'd worked with Clara, she had never shared something so personal. The realization hit him. Her quiet empathy hadn't been a duty. It had come from a place of memory, of loss, of love she'd once carried herself. "I'm sorry," Lily said softly. "That must have been hard." Clara gave a small smile. "It was. But it also made me see how precious these moments are. The ordinary ones. Laughter over a bad jazz tune, or tea in the middle of the day. Things you don't think you'll miss, until you do." The room grew still, the weight of her words settling gently rather than heavily. Ethan watched the exchange with something stirring inside him. Respect, gratitude, and a strange ache that someone who had spent years at his side had carried such a burden quietly. For Lily, Clara's words were comfort. For Ethan, they were a reminder. Time was fragile, and presence mattered more than perfection. The change didn't happen all at once, but it was noticeable. For the first time in years, Ethan Cross adjusted his schedule. Not for a merger, not for a board meeting, but for Lily. Meetings that once crowded his mornings were pushed back. Video calls that stretched late into the night were rescheduled or declined outright. When his executives asked why, his answer was simple. Priorities have shifted. At first, the staff exchanged whispers, unsure of what to make of their tireless leader suddenly drawing lines. But as days passed, they saw something they hadn't before. Ethan wasn't less powerful, he was different. More present. More human. He started bringing small comforts into his office for Lily. A soft throw draped permanently across the armchair by the window. A playlist of jazz, tucked quietly into his speaker system. A tray of her favorite teas stocked in the executive lounge. When she visited, the space felt less like a fortress and more like a haven. One afternoon, Lily sat in that armchair, sunlight painting her skin in a warm glow. Ethan leaned against the desk, watching her sip her tea. His phone buzzed insistently beside him. 3 missed calls, 2 urgent messages, but for the first time he ignored them. "You know," Lily said, setting her cup down, "you don't have to babysit me every second." He smiled, the corners of his mouth softening. "I'm not babysitting. I'm being here. There's a difference." Her eyes lingered on him, shimmering with something unspoken. She could feel it, this shift, this quiet surrender of control in favor of connection. Later that day, Clara passed by his office and paused at the sight through the glass wall. Ethan was seated beside Lily, not across from her, not towering over her, but right there, shoulders relaxed, laughing at something she said. The image startled her, though in the best way. For years, she had seen him as the man who conquered the world without pause. Now, she saw a man learning that strength wasn't only about empire. It was about choosing moments that could never be bought back. And for Lily, those moments were everything. The evening light filtered through the tall windows of Ethan's office, painting the room in soft gold. The workday had ended, but Ethan remained, seated beside Lily as she leaned comfortably against him. The city beyond the glass glowed with its restless energy, but here, in this quiet corner, time felt slower. Clara stepped in quietly to drop off the final reports. She paused when she saw Lily nestled against Ethan's shoulder, their hands intertwined, their conversation hushed and tender. She smiled faintly, placing the folder on his desk without interrupting. Lily noticed her and brightened. "Clara," she called softly. "Come here." Clara approached, expecting another polite exchange, but Lily rose slightly, extending her arms. The hug was light but full of warmth. When Lily pulled back, her voice dropped to a whisper meant for Clara alone. "Thank you for giving him back to me." Clara's eyes softened, caught off guard. She opened her mouth to reply, but before she could, Ethan spoke from where he sat. His tone was quieter than usual, stripped of command. "She's right," he said. "I didn't realize how much I'd been losing sight of. You reminded me." For once, Clara didn't deflect with a professional smile. She simply nodded. "You both reminded me, too, what it means to hold on to what matters." The three shared a stillness, unspoken understanding threading between them. Clara stepped back a moment later, gathering her things to leave. As she walked toward the door, she glanced over her shoulder. Ethan sat with Lily's hand in his, their laughter mingling softly in the fading light. And she knew then that her small gesture, a blanket, a cup of tea, a willingness to see, had become something larger than she ever imagined. For Ethan, it wasn't power or wealth that touched him most. It was kindness. Simple, human, steady kindness that gave him back the heart he'd nearly buried beneath the weight of responsibility. And in that truth, he found a strength he knew he would carry forever.